Welcome to the Spilled Ink and Coffee Show, where we take book discussions to a new level. We don't just read books, we interview them, journal about them, sip coffee, spill thoughts, and explore stories on and off the page. Grab a cup and get cozy, because every book deserves a great conversation.
Can you handle the dark? Turn off the lights, pour a cup of coffee, and do not look under the bed. Enter the twisted mind behind some of the most addictive, sleep-depriving thrillers on your bookshelf. We're talking masterclass plot twists and heart-pounding page-turners with best-selling author J.D. Barker. Keep listening if you dare.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello, Mr.
Happy Friday.
Barker.
Yes, a very happy Friday.
You guys do some great social media stuff. You're popping up all over the place.
That's Casey. That is all Casey.
Well, thank you. It's new and I'm pushing myself because I'm not a social media guru by any stretch of the imagination. But I do like my own version of storytelling.
Well, I don't think any of us have it figured out. I've got no clue what to do on there.
Oh, my stars. It's something else.
I just keep going to my 20-year-old daughter. What do you think about this? What do you think about this? Oh, well, thank you so much for taking time to chat with us today. I'm super excited. I
Absolutely
have enjoyed diving into your books like no other. Like I've been hooked. You got me.
Oh, that's great to hear. I appreciate it.
First, can I just say that, Mr. Barker, your pictures do not do you justice. You are very stunning.
Oh, thank you.
The eyes are piercing. I just have to say it. I know Rachel's looking at me. We're both teachers. Rachel is a language arts teacher, and I performance and visual arts. And I'm almost kind of, and I know we're not even into questions yet, but have you ever performed on a stage? It's not even on the question sheet, but I feel like you must have.
To be honest with you, like growing up, I always wanted to be a rock star, like a singer. But I'm terrible. Like I can't carry a tune. I'm totally tone deaf. So when I was in college, I basically worked in the music business, but I'm like the outside of it. I managed a bunch of different bands. I booked a whole bunch of venues. So I was constantly in the mix of all of it, but I never actually got up on the stage to perform because nobody really wants to hear that.
Oh my goodness.
I feel every bit of nobody wants to hear this. So I got you there.
I started singing in the car the other day with my daughter, and she's like, "Dada, please don't do that. Like, stop." Apparently, I ruined K-pop Demon Hunters for her.
What? Oh my stars!
But it's so catchy.
I know. It's one of the, if you've seen that, like you'll wake up at 3:00 in the morning, stumbling to the bathroom with those songs in your head.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so Soda Pop is my favorite song. What's yours, Mr. Barker? What were you singing? Are you a Saja boy or are you one of the girls?
Well, my daughter will also tell me that boy bands are stupid, so I'm not allowed to say that. But that is probably my favorite song. But if she asked me, I would probably say Golden.
Got it.
Same.
Yeah, that keeps me out of trouble.
That's like my jam. Like I'm driving, I gotta wake up in the morning. I'm gonna crank that and bop down the road.
So friends, it's the Spilled Ink and Coffee Show, and we're here with author J.D. Barker. It's very exciting, and people have already heard that we are chit-chatting before the official welcome. But welcome, thanks for having us, Mr. Barker. This is phenomenal. What you do is phenomenal. And Rachel, take it away.
So again, loving the books, especially the 4MK series. How amazing. Tell us, who are you as a storyteller?
Ooh, well, that's actually a very long story. So I grew up without a TV in the house. This was the 70s, so that doesn't mean much. There were only 3 channels anyway. But my mom used to drag us to the library all the time, so I started reading at a really early age. By the time I got into kindergarten, I had read like all the Hardy Boys and Nancy Drews, and I moved on to like Charles Dickens and Mark Twain. And I loved reading. At one point, my mom owned an antique store, and we used to go to a lot of garage sales. And I remember going to one, and a guy had a box of books, and there was a copy of Dracula sitting up on top for 25 cents. I was 8 years old. I picked it up, and I looked at it, and I was like, "There's no way my mom's going to let me buy this," because it looked scary. It looked like something an adult should have, not a kid. But she let me buy it, and I read it, and it scared the bejesus out of me. of me. For like the next 3 weeks, I was looking under the bed, I'm checking the closet for monsters. And it was the first time a book had ever gotten like an emotional reaction out of me. And I think I've been chasing that feeling as a reader and a writer ever since, just trying to recreate that. So that's basically what sparked the interest in me. My mom also used to tell me like writing is a fantastic hobby, but you can't make a living at it. You have to get a real job. And she kind of drilled that into my head. So I did what I thought I was supposed to do. I finished up high school. I went off to college. I got a couple of degrees, ended up working in finance. But I would come home at night and I would write. I would work on other people's projects. I stumbled into a side hustle as a book doctor and ghostwriter. So I would write memoirs for people, actors, actresses, sports figures, things like that. I would get a lot of phone calls and work with a lot of editors. Like they would buy a manuscript that was 90% there, but it needed a particular tweak. And they went back to the author, and the author just wasn't capable of doing it. Sometimes they overwrote, or their dialogue was horrible. Whatever it was, they couldn't fix. So they would bring me in as a hired gun to basically clean up that manuscript. So while I was working in finance during the daytime, I was coming home at night and doing that sort of thing. And I did that for a little over 2 decades, for 23 years. Wow. Over that time frame, I had 6 different books that hit the New York Times bestseller list that all came out with other people's names on the cover that I had essentially written, which gets old after a while. So number 6 hit up, and my wife pulled me aside and she said, listen, I know you want to be a full-time author. Let's figure out how to make this happen. But at this point, I was 43 years old. We were kind of stuck because I had a really good job. I had a good salary, and we had all the trappings of that. We had a big house, we had cars, we had a boat. So our monthly net was somewhere between $10,000 and $15,000. So I couldn't just walk away from the job. So she came up with this crazy plan. We sold everything that we owned. We bought a tiny little duplex in Pittsburgh. We rented out one side to some tenants, and we moved into the other half and basically lived off that rental income long enough for me to write the first book. And I remember I was sitting down at the kitchen table one morning and looking at the bank statement, and she said, it looks like you got about 15, 18 months to make this work before you have to get another job, so go. And that's when I cranked out the first novel, and I haven't turned back.
I love a solid deadline.
Yeah, it's nothing like putting your feet to the coals. I've talked to so many big name authors since then that I've gotten to know, and it's funny because a lot of them, like, you really need that pressure. Like I would have sat in that, behind that desk doing a job I absolutely hate for the rest of my life if my wife hadn't, given me that kick in the butt.
What really made you, so you talked about your, growing up without a TV in the house, and some of those Nancy Drews, those Hardy Boys, those kind of that we kind of got us all started reading. What really made the switch to, I want to create these stories, I want to tell these stories? Where was that?
It was really during those book doctor and ghostwriter days, because I would, I'd take a novel that just needed a lot of work, it was a mediocre story, and I would turn it into something that hit a bestseller list. And when you do that enough, like I learned what people really wanted to see in a good selling novel, and like I knew the knowledge base was there, but it was a difficult thing for me to do because I spent 2 decades basically collaborating and working with other people, and all of a sudden I'm at a desk all by myself writing that first book with no input from anybody. So it was very odd. I mean, even to this day, I prefer working with others than I do writing a solo novel. Honestly, though, like as a writer, I think the memoirs that I wrote are what really helped me because, like I would sit down with like a female politician, interview her for like an entire weekend and get, dozens of tapes of questions and answers and stuff like that. She would tell me the stuff she wants in the book, then I would have to, find the stuff that she doesn't actually want to talk about and get her to talk about that. And that's what would have to go in the book. And then after I had all the material, I'd have to sit down and write this book in first person from her point of view. And when you do that enough, you get into the heads of other people, it basically teaches you how to create character. So I've often been asked, like if I would have started writing my own novels back in my 20s when I started the ghostwriter thing, would they have worked as well? And I honestly don't think they would have because I didn't have the skill set that I needed. I had a 2-decade learning curve before I actually wrote that first book.
Some real on-the-job training right there.
Yeah.
Some would say that it's almost a method approach.
Probably, because I've never had any formal training, and it's funny because I do a lot of speeches at colleges, and a lot of times they'll offer me participation in their MFA program or something like that. I am scared to death of sitting down with a teacher and having somebody tell me how to write because I honestly don't know why my writing works. I don't know why people like it as much as they do. I know that I understand the writing process because mainly because I've read so much. I've read so many books that story structure is just ingrained in my head. Like you can take The Fourth Monkey and drop it into a 3-act structure, which is not something I thought about while I was writing it, but it's there because I've saw it so many times. That formula is identical in almost every book.
So speaking of your writing and your stories, who are your stories for? Who are you writing for? Who's your audience? Who do you believe they are?
Yeah, honestly, it's me. Like I'm writing something that like this is a movie that I want to see. This is a book I want to read, and it doesn't exist. That's what really drives me.
I love that answer. I mean, who else?
Yeah, I mean, like I could lie to you and say it's my wife or something, and she's she's my alpha reader. She reads everything that I write, but like she likes to read literary fiction, so like I know this is not her jam. She does it to as a favor. But every story that I tell, everything I put on paper is something that it doesn't exist in the world, and I think it should.
Brilliant. Well, you talked a little bit about one of the first books you kind of picked up at a garage sale was Dracula, and I wanted to ask a little bit about that collaboration that you were able to do with Bram Stoker's family and writing the prequel. How did that even come about, and what did it feel like to get your hands on some unpublished, unseen manuscripts before?
Yes, I've captured lightning in a bottle a bunch of different times, and like this is one of them. And I tell people not to stand next to me outside because it feels like karma is going to try to even things out, and you don't want to be there when the lightning strike comes down. But with that one, my very first book was a horror novel called Forsaken, and it was up for Best Debut Horror Novel with the Horror Writers Association. And when I went to the conference to accept the award, there was a signing, and I sat down next to Dacre Stoker, who is Bram's great-grandnephew. And we sat there for an hour, and we just kind of talked as we signed books, and he asked me a ton of questions about my history as a book doctor and a ghostwriter. I picked his brain about everything I could think of related to Bram Stoker. And then we just kind of parted ways, and I didn't think much of it. But the next day he pulled me aside and he said, listen, I'm going to be honest with you. I knew who you were when I sat down. My family and I have been trying to find somebody to write a prequel to Dracula for a while now, using Bram's original notes and journals. Is that something you'd be interested in working on? I said yes, because you always say yes when somebody asks you a question like that. You figure out the whys and hows later. And then we met, I guess about 2 months later. He had a cabin in the Carolina mountains, and he disappeared for 5 minutes and came back with this big box and set it on the kitchen table, and it was everything that Bram had on his desk when he wrote the original Dracula. There were notes scribbled on laundry receipts. He had a day timer. Like, a lot of people don't realize this, but Bram was a theater manager. So when he plotted out Dracula, he used a day timer, which makes sense. Like at 2 o'clock on Wednesday, Mina does this. At 3 o'clock, Jonathan does this. But we poured through all that material. But he told me two things that really made me want to work on the project. I had read Dracula, probably a dozen times over my lifetime, and it always starts with Jonathan Harker on the train. In real life, Dacre said that's not actually the beginning of the book. That was page 103. So the original 100-some pages, Bram, wanted to tell the world that vampires were real. Like he, completely believed that vampires were real, to the point where he had himself cremated when he died to, save his immortal soul. Like he was hardcore into it. And he wrote that, the first section, it was very autobiographical, explained why vampires were real. And when he turned the book into his editor in London, his editor read it, then pushed it back across the desk and said, no, we can't do this. Because at the time Jack the Ripper was active in London, people believed in the supernatural and paranormal, and they were afraid of what would happen if they put this out into the public. Bram needed the money, so he let them strip those 100 pages out of the book. So Dacre and I, when we sat down, our plan was to recreate what Bram wanted to tell. But all we had were his journals, his diaries. We had his sister had a diary. We basically pulled all that together and pieced what we could and wrote the story that we thought he wanted to tell. And when we got it done, we had to find a way to verify it, which was very tricky because nobody knew what was actually in those 100 pages. So I started to do some research and realized that there was one copy of the Dracula manuscript in existence that had ever been found. It was found in a barn in Pennsylvania, and it was bought at auction by Paul Allen, the co-founder of Microsoft. So I reached out to Paul Allen's company, and after a couple conversations back and forth, they allowed Dacre and I to fly out to Seattle and actually view the original Dracula manuscript. So they locked us in a conference room, took away our phones, made us wear gloves. A couple big guys stood over us behind us and watched everything that we did. And Dacre and I, first thing we did was flip flip to the first page, looking to see what was there. And it was page 103, it was crossed out, and there was a 1 next to, and Dracula was written up at the top of the page. So it didn't have those 100 pages either. But as we started flipping through the remaining pages, we realized that the deleted scenes were still there, because this wasn't, he didn't have Microsoft Word. If he deleted something, he just drew a line through it.
Right.
So we started to focus on those deleted scenes, and they all tied back to the first half of the book, to the missing pages. So we were able to use that to verify the story we wanted to tell. If you read Dracula, which is the book that we put together, the author's note at the end to me is my favorite part, because we tell everybody what is true in the book and what isn't, and it the stuff that you feel is fiction is actually 100% true.
Just to the opportunity. I mean, as an English major, you call it the opportunity to get your hands on that original manuscript, is mind blowing to me.
It really felt like Bram was in the room with us when we were working on that. Just because just the material, and we lifted actual paragraphs that he had written and included them in the book. It felt like he was part of the process the whole way.
That is the coolest thing. So you that whole you obviously you had to do some research. You had to get a hold of the original manuscripts. Kind of to jump forward a little bit, especially to the 4MK series. One of the things that struck me in reading the series is the detail that you go into and that you have about the science behind this and the police forensic. What is that research process like with these books, with the 4MK books, versus what you had to do with Dracula?
I spent a lot of time talking to people. I was in Florida at the time, and I visited a prison, and I actually talked to real killers, people that were in prison for murder. And I also talked to a lot of police officers. And I quickly learned when you hang out with police officers, particularly homicide investigators, they have a very dark sense of humor. And I called the detective out on it at one point, and he said, to be honest with you, you have to have that. If you can't look at this and find some kind of humor in it, you're not going to be able to last long term. So the detectives that do find humor in it, they're there for 10, 20, 30 years, and they close out their career there. The ones who can't, it completely overwhelms them. And right after he told me that, he said he just came back from a crime scene where they found a dead baby in a crib. It was at a meth house, and the baby basically died in a crib and was there for 2 days before anybody knew that the baby was dead. So that just really brought into focus what this guy is dealing with, on a daily basis. And I try to incorporate all of that into the characters that I create.
I think that definitely comes through, kind of the dark humor for sure. I think one of the first things, the description in The Fourth Monkey, when, not to give too much away, when the person's hit by the bus and you describe them picking the person. I actually highlighted it and circled it because I was like, whoa, I got an image in my head.
I think, it's funny because I think that's why the book worked as well as it did, because I love horror, I love thrillers, and it's not a typical police procedural. I brought a lot of horror elements into the story that you just typically don't find when you pick up a thriller book, and I think that's why it resonated so well with readers.
Yeah, but it wasn't, I'm not a huge horror fan. I love a good thriller, and this, to me, it walked the perfect line between the two. Even in The Fifth to Die, I felt like it was the perfect balance between horror and thriller, where I wasn't overwhelmed with the horror aspect.
Yeah, I found a long time ago, the less descriptive you are, I tend to drop a couple little clues about what something looks or feels like, and I let the reader's imagination fill in the rest, and it creates this very visceral scene to the person that's reading the story. So it's a conscious effort, I guess, is what I'm getting at.
Well, it's successful because the imagery is definitely there. So in all that research, what would you say in talking with, prisoners, with criminals, with the police? What's your most unusual source in all of your research?
Well, the people that I spoke to in prison by far, helped shape this book. Because when I wrote these, I was basically setting out to answer a question. Could you take a perfectly normal person and drop them into the wrong circumstances and create a killer? And when I interviewed people that were in prison for murder, I quickly realized there are two sets. They're the ones that, basically the sociopaths. You talk to them and they will brag about the crime. They want to talk about it. They love seeing your reactions to it. It doesn't hit them in any way other than, pleasure. And you can talk to somebody else who's in for murder, who maybe it was an accident, or maybe his wife was cheating and he killed somebody, but it was like an emotional thing. But like people like that, they completely regret what they did, and they carry that baggage with them for the rest of their life. It's just two different groups. So I really I talked to as many people like that as I possibly could to try and shape the character. And then there's just this emotional journey that I tried to hit with the diary entries. Can you take a perfectly normal person and turn them into this over time?
How would you describe your writing style? And if it was a drink, what would it be?
Well, my favorite drink is a White Russian, so I'd probably have to go with that.
Yeah.
A writing style, God, I don't really know. I mean, after I poured through the classics as a kid, I devoured everything that Stephen King wrote. And I studied him, like you mentioned, highlighting portions of my book. Like I will go through a Stephen King novel and then I'll go back through with the highlighter, a pen, and I am looking at every little thing. Like when he introduces a character, like he can do it in like 3 sentences and create like a perfectly well-rounded person in just a couple of words. So I try to pick that kind of stuff apart. And he's probably the only author that I've really dug that deep into. So I think a lot of my writing style is influenced by that. I also write a lot of books with James Patterson. And over time, I think we're on book 7 or so at this point. We're constantly on the phone. He's always telling me what I'm doing wrong. He's always right, and he's telling me how to fix it. So like his voice is always back here, because it's James Patterson. If he tells you did something wrong, you don't fight back. You listen to the guy, and he's always right. So I think that's shaped my writing style quite a bit. More recently, the film and TV guys have gotten involved because I've got 8 different projects in what I call various stages of Hollywood hell. So I got producers and people that are weighing in on particular scenes. Like this is too expensive to film. Could it take place here instead of there? And that was never a conscious thought in the earlier books that I wrote, but it's always there with the stuff that I'm writing now. Jim and I were working on a book a few years back called The Noise, and it was optioned by E1, I think it was going to make it into a streaming series. The same people that produced the show The 100 were behind it. But they were reading the chapters as we wrote them, so as we went. And then they were weighing in on what could be done and what couldn't be done. And we wrote 6 different endings because it wouldn't work as a TV show, and a lot of different voices out there. So you'd be surprised what actually shapes it. I mean, that's why I recently wrote these 3 prequels to my 4MK series, and when I did it, I didn't tell anybody I was doing it, because at first I wasn't sure I could even pull it off. But I wanted to get them all on paper, get them all done before I showed them to anybody.
So kind of tagging onto that with the whole writing process, and you talked about the diary entries and all of that. So I love a good multiple point of view book, and obviously the 4MK, you have multiple points of view. When you're writing a book like that, do you write one character? Do you write Porter all the way through? Did you write, Nash all the way through, or do you write in chunks? What's the process when you're writing a multiple POV?
So I tend to write everything in order, and I jump POVs as I'm writing. Mm-hmm. A lot of times it's because I get stuck, like I don't know what's going to happen next with that character, so I'll move on to this person's point of view and think about the first one as I'm writing it. That happens quite a bit. I've sat down and tried to write a book, 100% in one person's point of view from start to finish, and I have yet to pull it off. Like for whatever reason, my head just will not go there. I get to a certain point, I'm 4 or 5 chapters in, and I'm like, I need to do something different. I end up bringing in another point of view. The 4MK prequels are about as close to it as I've ever gotten because they're written from Anson Bishop's point of view. So it's almost like one long diary entry. So I had to stick in his head for most of it. But it was challenging for me to do that. I use a program called Scrivener. I don't want to go off to the weeds too much, but from a writing standpoint, Scrivener is fantastic because you can see all of your chapters like on the side of your screen. So I can take points of view and I can drag the chapters around and reposition them.
Okay.
And I'll often do that in order to create those cliffhanger type moments. I move this chapter here so that you have, I basically take the reader away from whatever's happening. They have to read something else before they can get back to it. And before you know it, you've read 100 pages to try and figure out what's going on.
And it's absolute torture in the best way possible because you end the chapter on a cliff. You're like, wait, no, I want to hear more about this. Oh, wait, what's going on here? I forgot something. I mean, it's a genius way to get me to read way past my bedtime.
It's honestly one of those things that I picked up from working with Patterson. Because one of the things we do with almost every draft is we go back through and we pull the last like sentence or last paragraph from every chapter. Because when you're writing, your brain wants to create closure. It wants a beginning, middle, and end to that chapter. So you end up putting a lot of that down on paper. But if you're creating a thriller, a lot of times if you take that last little bit out, it creates a mini cliffhanger that forces you to have to turn the page in order to keep going. I use a bunch of beta readers for all of my books, and I give them printed copies. And I always ask them to tell me where they close the book. And I don't care if it's because you've got to make dinner, you've got to pick up your kids from school. I don't care what the reason is, but I want to know where you closed it. And when I get all those back, I look at those sections and I try to find some way to change the writing so you can't close it there.
Well, you do that very, very well. So in thinking about all of your books, who was your favorite character to write, and who was the hardest character to write?
Ooh, that's like asking who your favorite kid is. And I only have one, but it's still a hard question to answer. Yeah, my favorite book always tends to be whatever book I'm currently working on because I'm passionate about it. Favorite character? I've got a book called She Has a Broken Thing Where Her Heart Should Be that nobody wanted to publish because it's like almost 1,000 pages long. But it's basically like my retelling of Great Expectations, which is my all-time favorite book. I think the characters in there are actually my favorites that I've put down on paper.
What was the hardest one to write? The hardest character?
Probably Anson Bishop. Particularly with the prequels. For people familiar with the storyline, if you've read the original trilogy, I flash back and forth between present day and basically 15 years earlier. The killer is 15 years old, he's a kid, in these diary entries. And that basically carries through that entire trilogy. But with the prequels, I needed to fill in that 15-year gap because he's 30 years old when these murders take place. So I had to show that transition from basically a normal kid to a murderer over those 3 prequels. And I had to not only demonstrate, things coming at him, things changing, like he wants to do this, but circumstances make him do that. I had to show that evolution in his personality from, this, kid to a killer. And getting that down on paper was very tricky and difficult to do.
So you really, especially with those diary entries, you are you write inside his head so incredibly well. How do you get into that kind of twisted headspace to make that to get that so across that this is a twisted situation?
When I'm writing, it's almost like I'm watching a movie in my head play out, and the characters are doing their own thing, and I'm just writing it down as fast as I possibly can. I don't necessarily know where Anson is going to go next. I don't know what he's going to do next. But I've created characters that in my mind are as well-rounded as a real person, as somebody in my life. When I teach writers this, I always tell them if you had 5 different characters and you sit them down and you ask them the same question, you should get 5 different answers. If you don't, you're not done yet. You've got to go deeper into your characterization. You have to, they need to be fleshed out better. So Anson Bishop, I know how he reacts to certain things. It's not how I would personally react. A lot of times characters will say things that I would never say or do things I would never do, but it's what that person would do. I don't know if that makes sense, but I probably need to be medicated. These are actual voices in my head that I'm putting down on paper.
Those diary entries are just so powerful and so well written. I couldn't. That's what I wanted to read in the first book and in the Fourth Monkey. I just wanted to get to all the diary entries to see really that voice.
The funny thing about that is when I started shopping the book, half the agents that I talked to wanted me to pull the diary entries out. They wanted to sell it as a police procedural. And HMH, the first publisher, wanted to pull them out. And I kind of stuck to it. I was like, I think this needs to be here.
Yeah.
Now I've got the track record. It's easy to look back on 10 years because I've got fans telling me that they love the diary entries. But at the time,
it was my favorite part.
A lot of publishers didn't want to touch the book because they felt it was too dark, because of that. But I think you have to do something different, I think, if you want to break the mold, if you want to stand out in the crowd.
And that would be making sure that the voices in your head are never silenced.
Yeah. Yeah, even with these, I thought I was done, after the trilogy, but, not only do fans want to tell more of these stories, but I want to tell more of these stories. It's almost like Sam Porter's in the corner of my office tapping his foot going, hey, we got more we got to do.
So let me ask you this: even though that you've got the prequels, which are clearly about Anson, who would you consider to be like the main character of the 4MK series? Is it Porter or is it Anson?
I really think it's Porter. You know,
and if Porter were to walk into a coffee shop, what would he order?
Oh, cappuccino, for sure. Like I know him well enough, I could drop him at the entrance to Disney World and I know what ride he's gonna go on first. I know his favorite song, I know his girlfriend's name from high school, like stuff that will never make it into a book, but these are the things you have to know in order to write a person.
Wait, so what's this Disney ride? I need to know.
Space Mountain.
I can see that. Something about all the metal. I don't so when you started writing the 4MK series, when you started writing The Fourth Monkey, did you have the idea that this is going to be a series? Did you intend it to be a series?
No, not at all. It was supposed to be a standalone book. The original title was Diary of a Madman. And that's an Ozzy Osbourne album, so I knew I couldn't keep that, but it fit the story. And I just, one day I was sitting down and I was just thinking about the killer, who relies on hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil. There actually is a fourth monkey, which is do no evil. And if I talked to a bunch of people that actually collect these statues, and it's very difficult to find a statue that has all four monkeys. So, like, it's a collector's thing. So all these people kept bringing up, but the fourth monkey, the fourth monkey, the fourth monkey. And like one day I just thought about it, I'm like, that's a cool title. For a standalone. I didn't expect it to go anywhere. When my agent was talking to publishers, we kind of ended up in a bidding war. We had multiple publishers that wanted it. And she called me and said, hey, if you have an idea for another book, send it over to me because I can get you a multi-book deal here. So I quickly scribbled out an idea for the second book and sent it off to her, and she got me a 2-book deal with HMH. And then when I wrote the second book, I was like 400 or 500 pages in, and I wasn't done with the story. I knew I could write it and I could cut a bunch of things out and I could get it done with 2 books if I wanted to, but it didn't feel right for me to do that. So I actually turned in The Fifth to Die. It ends with to be concluded. And I didn't have a deal for the third book when I did that. So I didn't know that the third book was even going to be able to come out.
In your process of writing all of this, what are you listening to? Are you listening to music and you're just death metaling out?
I've tried listening to music. If I listen to anything with lyrics, then those words tend to get into my head and end up on paper. So that doesn't work. If I listen to classical or something, movie soundtracks, the writing actually starts to follow the cadence of the song. So if the music is speeding up, the writing is speeding up. So this may seem silly, but I actually listen to a Thunderstorm soundtrack, white noise, whenever I'm writing. And it goes back, all the way back to my ghostwriter and book doctor days, because when I wanted to squeeze out words, I was working in the corporate world. I was working 60 to 80 hours a week. I didn't have a whole lot of time. So I would put on headphones and listen to this thunderstorm, and it was like a Pavlov's dog thing. Every time my brain heard that, it just knew, oh, we're writing now. And like I could snap right into that mode. So to this day, I've got headphones, I listen to that. When I travel, I'm listening to that. Anytime I'm writing, I'm listening to a thunderstorm.
Tell us a little bit more about the book that is grand and behind you.
The first Scarlet Door. So I'm taking, at the end of Six Wicked Child, the diary entries leave Anson Bishop at a particular place with certain people. He's 15 years old, and that's kind of where I leave it. Again, when I wrote this, I didn't expect it to go anywhere else. I figured the readers would kind of fill in their blanks and get it to the point where he becomes that killer. But with the prequels, I basically pick up right at that scene, literally like in the next page of what would have been written there. And then I just keep the story going, and we plow through 15 years of Anson Bishop's life, and those things that do change him as he goes. It was a lot of fun to write. I had mentioned that I did it without telling anybody, and from a process standpoint, that was fantastic, because if I was on book 3 and I had an idea, I could go back to book 1 and I could tweak some things to make sure that particular idea worked. Because the original trilogy is very, very twisty, and I knew with these prequels I would have to take everything the reader knows and I would have to flip it on its head completely. But I have to do it in a very odd way. A lot of people around the world are basically reading books 4, 5, and 6 first, and then going back now to read 1, 2, and 3. New people are going to come into this and read 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I needed to come up with a story that actually worked regardless of where you start, book-wise. So there's a lot of moving parts there, but I think I pulled it off. We'll find out pretty soon.
And you've already done 1, 2, and 3, correct? They're complete?
Yeah, they're all done. They're in my publisher's hands. They're getting translated. I've got my own imprint at Simon & Schuster, so like domestically I could have put out all 3 books on the same day, which was my original plan, because I still feel bad about making people wait after Fifth to Die. They had to wait a whole year for the next one to come out, with To Be Concluded, being the last word. So I wanted to put out all 3 books on the same day, and I could have done that in the US and Canada and places like that, but when we started talking to my foreign publishers, they all pushed back. There was no way they were going to do that. So we agreed on a publication schedule that puts 6 months between each title, which gives them enough time to do what they need to do. So the first Scarlet Door comes out in September, the next one is in March, and then the last one is September of next year.
As readers, we enjoy the anticipation. So thank you for that. That's part of our thrill to go and find that book in the independent bookstore and say, oh, finally, and then you hug it and you kiss it and you smell it and you do all the things. I'm very tangible with my books. Now, what you've just done is a massive evolution. What is the next evolution for you as a storyteller?
Well, the books have all been optioned for the 4th time. So there's a series in the works. Sylvester Stallone's company picked them up, Balboa Productions. They brought in a woman named Channing Powell as showrunner. And if you're familiar with Walking Dead, she was basically the puppet master behind that, which I love, because what they're basically trying to do is 2 separate series. They've got one that's going to follow the Porter, the modern day stuff, and another one that's going to follow the Anson Bishop early years. So like they've got the ability to create 2 different shows, and they brought in the right people to pull that off. I've got a lot of ideas to keep the 4MK series going. So basically a book that takes place after Six Wicked Child. I'll probably go there. At this very moment, I'm actually working on another book with Patterson. We tend to bounce back and forth, and it gives me a chance to kind of think about what I want to work on next while I'm working on something with him.
Your life is very hectic. What keeps you grounded? How do you come back to earth? When do you breathe?
It's all about family for me, to be honest with you. Like I get up first thing in the morning, I start writing at 7. I usually knock about 2,000 to 3,000 words out. That's around 10:30 or 11. I turn on the internet. The internet's switched off while I'm writing. I don't want the outside world getting in here. Then my inbox fills up with all the business stuff that I have to deal with. I do a bunch of interviews like this in the afternoon. My quitting bell rings at 3 o'clock, no matter what. And at 3 o'clock, I go for a run. I live on a little island in New England called Newcastle. So I do a lap around the island, and I kind of use that time to clear my head and think about what I'm going to work on the next day. Then I get home and I spend the rest of the night with my wife and daughter, because honestly, that's what it's all about. My daughter's 8 years old now. I've been home for every day of it, and I cherish every moment.
Outside of writing, and your thunderstorms, and your favorite authors, and your favorite co-authors, what else really fuels your imagination? Well, we know K-pop Demon Hunters is at the top of that list.
Absolutely. Like having an 8-year-old kid and being able to watch the world experience through somebody for the very first time, like to me that's priceless. But I'm picking up story ideas no matter where I go. I think there's story in everything. So I'm always on the lookout for some exciting little thing. And it's funny because a lot of times I'll take something that happens over here, combine it with something over here, and these 2 things don't make any sense together. It's almost like chocolate and peanut butter. It just sort of works. That's where a lot of the books tend to come from.
I like that. Your books come from chocolate and peanut butter.
Yeah.
So I might have an idea of the answer to this question just because you've spoken about Stephen King, James Patterson. I think there was a Clive Cussler mentioned in there maybe. So if there was any author, living or dead, that you would love to sit down and share a cup of coffee with or write Russian, who would that be?
Probably Charles Dickens. Because he was doing
I
this
didn't see that one coming.
Me either.
Yeah, I mean, my favorite book is Great Expectations. I love that book.
I love teaching that book.
So I mean, She Has a Broken Thing Where Her Heart Should Be is basically my retelling of that story in modern day with kind of a horror twist to it. But he would probably be my go-to because he was hustling back in the day. I mean, he's writing newspaper columns, he's doing books, he's doing this. Writing is a very odd career. I think it was Stephen King who said you've got a lifetime to write the first book and you've got 6 months to write the next one. And that is so true. Like once you step on that roller coaster, there's no getting off. But I love it. I'm working on my own books. I'm working with James Patterson. I've got a bunch of co-authors that I brought in for books that I'm working on for Simon & Schuster. I enjoy having a bunch of different irons in the fire.
I love that, just because it was so unexpected. You talk a lot about, you do a lot of co-authoring, and publishing and the book world, I feel like, especially in the last 5 years, is the evolution, what's changing and how things are marketed, all of that. Where do you see books and publishing really going in the future?
I see a lot of authors taking control of their own careers. Like if you look at my very first book I self-published, then I did a bunch of traditional titles, and then with I think it was a caller's game, I called my agent and I said, I want to publish this domestically on my own through my own small press, and you can sell all the foreign rights. So I did kind of a hybrid approach, which I really liked. But in today's world, I've got to deal with Simon & Schuster, where I've got my own publishing imprint. So what that means is I can put out what I want when I want, but when I publish a book, I have to pay for it. So when I do a 50,000 book print run, that's coming out of my own pocket, but I'm recouping the profits of that, not only as the publisher, but also as the author. So if you take a step back and you look at all the people that are out there writing today, the bulk of them are going indie first. And they're starting, and the traditional publishers are watching that very closely. They're seeing, they're watching for who's succeeding, who's not succeeding. And if you take an indie author that's doing really well, and you're a traditional publisher, and you say, okay, we'll give you $1 million for your next book, that indie author is probably going to say no, because they know they can make $1 million on their own, and they can do it without that, corporate overhead, staring down at them. But if you come to them and you say, well, why don't we partner on this thing? You can put out the book, you pay for the, like I do, I pay for my own print runs. But I use Simon & Schuster to handle my print sales and distribution, so I get to use their business model to push my books. We're working at this as partners. It's a team effort. That I think makes a lot more sense to some of these indie authors, because they can, through that model, they can do a lot of things they couldn't normally do on their own. Something as simple as just getting your books in Walmart and Costco and Target, pharmacies. Indie authors can't do that. You need the right distribution system. And I think if you look at like Penguin Random House and some of these other big publishers, they haven't changed what they're doing for years. Like they're right. Following the same model they were following 50 years ago, and something there has to give. And I think that's it. They're going to have to take a step back, look at their business, and say, how can we leverage this properly with these people that are out here writing these books that are selling? How do we do this together? And I think that's where it's going.
Well, it sounds like you're leading the charge as an innovator of this new concept, and I like it. I love a collaboration.
I tend to throw a lot of spaghetti at the wall. A lot of it doesn't stick, but occasionally something works.
So what advice would you give to future storytellers, future writers, as they're kind of starting on this journey of, hey, I think I want to actually do this and survive this way?
It's kind of cliche, but I would tell them they need to write every day. Writing is very much like going to the gym. Like, I think there's a writer muscle, and the more you do it, the stronger it gets. And if you take a week off, you take a month off, that muscle gets weaker. There's definite similarities there. And if you write, like I was working 60 to 80 hours a week, and I still cranked out novels. Like, you can do it. If you write 200 to 300 words a day, that's a novel within a year. And if you do it that fast, you're going to find that your voice doesn't change a whole lot from start to finish. If it takes you 4 years to write a book, your writer voice is completely different from page 1 to page 400, which means you've got to do a lot of editing. But if you write every day, I think you can get through it. And the other thing you really need to understand is you're going to hear no way more than you're going to hear yes. A lot of people are going to tell you why they can't work with you before they're going to tell you why they can. And you have to develop a very thick skin.
Do you feel that young authors or new authors, do they need to really shop for an agent? Is an agent, a literary agent, crucial or not?
I think it's important that every author try the traditional route at least once, and I think they should do it at the beginning. If anything, just to understand how the whole process works, so they can see their book going from their desk to an actual bookshelf and everything that happens in between. Once you have that knowledge base, you can take a step back, and if you're willing to do the work, you can put out the next one as an indie. But it's important to understand how to do it.
So in some of like your marketing, like I was looking online, and for one of your previous books, did you give away a night in a haunted house?
Yeah. So one of the things I always do when I've got a new book coming out, I look at what everybody is doing to market their books, and I'll make a list of that, and I try to come up with things that nobody is doing. Because my general thinking is if I do what everybody else is doing, I'm never going to be able to rise above them. I need something that's different. So that particular book, it was about a haunted house. It was about a real haunted house, which is, I live on an island, and this haunted house is on an island right off the coast of my island. So I arranged an overnight stay. So we used that from a marketing standpoint. We put out a press release, about the book, saying that the author has given away an overnight stay in the haunted house at the basis of his book. As soon as that press release went out, I did television, I did radio, podcasts. I talked to a lot of different people and created an insane amount of buzz. And people were all over social media. I'll do it. Will you do it? I won't do it. I'll do it if you do it. Like everybody was talking about it, and all of that to me was free. You can't beat that. The only thing that really, you can put money behind a book. You can buy Facebook ads and Amazon ads, and you can throw a bunch of dollars at it, and you will sell copies. But the only thing that really sells books in a meaningful way is word of mouth.
I feel like I'm taking a masterclass. Masterclass, if you're listening, Mr. J.D. Barker needs to get up on the masterclass. All of this information is masterclass worthy. Would you teach a masterclass? Do you teach one?
Absolutely. Because it's funny, before I started working with Patterson, I had watched his masterclass like 2 or 3 years earlier. And actually working with the guy, it's basically the same thing, except he calls and tells me what I'm doing wrong. But those classes, I love that one. Dan Brown has a fantastic one. There's a bunch of them. I've got a podcast called Writers Inc., and we're on episode 400. We've interviewed every big name author you could possibly think of. We've gotten their origin stories, we get their process, and I don't think I've heard the same process twice from 2 different people. Everybody comes at this completely differently. But I'm always learning. If we interview somebody and they're doing something that I haven't tried yet and it intrigues me, I'll try to figure it. I'll try to work it into my own process to see whether it's something that works for me. If it does, I keep doing it. If it doesn't, I push it off to the side and try the next thing. I think the day that I stop learning is probably the day I retire, and I think every author kind of needs to have that attitude.
That's such great advice for anyone who's trying to get into this business. If it's not working, try something else. Just keep going.
Yeah, learn from the mistakes.
Is there some sort of amazing, exciting marketing plan you have for the prequels?
There is something going on right now, but I can't talk about it yet. But you're going to probably start seeing it on social media pretty soon.
So I definitely need to keep my eyes open. Got it. I'm on it.
It's it's funny because the haunted house thing I think is a good example. That worked fantastic for me. But if another author wanted to do that same thing, it's not going to work. Because it's already been done. People have talked about it. So that's the hard part about this. I've got to come up with something different every single time.
That's the fun part.
It's fun. Yeah, I enjoy the marketing side of it. When Patterson and I write a book together, we have just as many calls on the business stuff as we do the writing process. And to this day, he's still hands-on with every television spot, every commercial, every ad that comes out. He came out of marketing. That's what he was doing before he started writing books. He wrote the Toys R Us theme song, if you remember that. I want to be a Toys R Us kid.
Wow.
So that's always been his thing, and it works. That's why he's James Patterson today.
Honestly, I'm hoping that it was your 8-year-old daughter that came up with this next promotion. So Rachel and I could dive in head first, and I'm not going to have myself scared out of my socks.
My daughter, about 2 years ago, she figured out what I actually do for a living. And now she tells everybody. We'll go out for dinner, and the waitress will act, what do you want for your order? And she's like, did you know my dad is a famous book writer?
Oh, she's proud.
I love that so much.
Yeah, when we did the release for the book you're talking about with the haunted house, it's called Something I Keep Upstairs. And we actually did the release on the island with the haunted house. And we had about 200 people out there. And she was signing books right there next to me. And it's the first time she ever got to experience that side of it. And she definitely fell in love with everybody lining up to talk to her.
Finish this sentence. The world needs more.
Surprises. I see it across the board, and I don't know if it's because I'm getting a little bit older, but when I watch a new TV show, it feels like I've heard that, I've seen that story before. A lot of times when I pick up a book, I've read that story before. But occasionally something does surprise me, and that's gold.
I feel like I got a few solid surprises in the 4MK series where it was I think Casey filmed me. She
was reading me quotes.
I was reading her quotes, and I opened up The Fifth to Die and for the first time, and I was going to the second page, and I just stopped and wait, Anson? I wasn't expecting that on the second page of the book. So I appreciate those kind of surprises and twists where literally I'm like, wait, what, wait, hold on, stop talking. I got to go back. I got to reread that.
a funny story with that book. My wife was pregnant with our daughter at the time, and she gave up coffee. And in solidarity, I gave up coffee too. So like that book took me almost twice as long to write. And when I turned it in, my editor called me like a week later. He's like, "Do you have some kind of problem with coffee?" And I was like, "Why?" He's like, "You mention it throughout this entire book. Everybody is drinking coffee." So like my subconscious was giving it to my characters because I couldn't have it myself.
Now that you say that, I'm thinking about like Claire and Sophie. There were a lot of empty coffee cups mentioned in the book. A lot of empty coffee cups.
Yep. A lot of coffee died during the making of that book.
So tell our listeners where they can find you and where they can find your books.
Sure. Easiest place to find me is at jdbarker.com. I'm on all the social medias at JD Barker, and the books can be found in pretty much every bookstore. The next one is the First Scarlet Door, coming out in September.
We now know where to find you in the books. When does the theatrical debut happen? Is there a date on this?
I wish I knew. I mean, this is the fourth time that the series has been optioned. It's been picked up over and over again. I mentioned I've got 8 different books that are working their way through. Nothing has ever made it to the screen like yet. And I sat down with somebody once, and he told me if you watch the credits at the end of a movie, 5 or 6 minutes of people's names going by, everybody there had to be there in order for that to get to the screen. You take one person away, and all of a sudden the house of cards comes apart. And when you actually work in that industry, you see that, like how they have to have all these players, how they all have to come together in this perfect storm. So I try not to get too excited about it. When I'm actually in that theater seat watching it along with everybody else, that's when I'll take a breath and realize that it's real.
It's gonna happen. I can feel it.
The people that they pulled together for this incarnation of it really does, the first 3 times did not feel like it was gonna happen. This one really feels like it's gonna happen.
Do you truly see it as a series, a streaming series, or as maybe each book is a movie? How, in your brain, what would you, in a perfect world, what would you want it to be?
So it's funny. So the first time when Fourth Monkey was optioned, this is almost 10 years ago, CBS was going to make a feature film for the first book and a series out of the other 2 books. And I did a bunch of phone calls with film studios and producers, and one of them was with Ron Howard and his partner. And the first thing they did was tell me everything they had to take out of the story in order to get it down to 2 hours. Like this character's got to come out, this storyline's got to go, this has to happen. And it didn't feel like it was going to be my story anymore. But in today's world, streaming is so popular. I honestly prefer it because not only can they tell the whole story that's in the book, but they come to people like me and they ask for, like what isn't in the book, what's on your cutting room floor, what material do you have that we haven't seen yet. And to me, like that's the better story. Like you're gonna get everything. So as far as I know, they're gonna do 1 season for each book.
That would be amazing. I mean, to me, that's how just because the time, I mean, it's so detailed. Like I actually read Fourth Monkey in the amount of time that the book takes place. Like the book basically takes place in 48 hours. I basically read the book in 40. So I felt like I was, I needed that next hour. And I think the streaming would make sense.
Yeah, I mean, I've got other projects where, feature film makes perfect sense. But for 4MK, I really do want to see it as a streaming series, 8 to 10 episodes per book.
Well, friends, there it is. Thank you, Mr. J.D. Barker, for taking the time out to talk with Rachel and I on the Spilled Ink and Coffee show. I see amazing things happening for you. I'm so excited. I feel like this is actually still just your beginning into all of the big things. I really do.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
And that's the ink, guys.
Bye.
That's a wrap. Time to close the book on today's episode. I'm Rachel.
And I'm Casey. If you had fun, hit the like, follow, and subscribe. Make sure you click on the bell icon.
You can also email us at spilledinkinkcoffeeshow@gmail.com. Send us your questions, tell us what you're reading, or share what we should dive into.
Until next time, keep your coffee hot
And your pages turning.
Bye, guys.